think you'd better... inside. Lao Tzu said, "Can people speak of the subtle? Why not? But only if you know what words mean. Those who know what words mean do not speak with words. Those who struggle for fish get wet. Those who chase animals run. It is not what they like it. Therefore, ultimate words depart from words. Ultimate action departs from action. What people of shallow knowledge compete for is trivial. Words have a source. Events have a leader. It is because contrivance has no knowledge that I do not claim to know." That was Chapter 99 from Wen Tzu, Understanding the Mysteries, Further Teachings of Lao Tzu, translated by Thomas Cleary. Welcome to Tea Time with Cassius. My name is Cassius King, and I am the producer of this show. The things that you will hear over the next half hour represent the views and opinions of Tea Times with Cassius and the people making them. All opinions and quotations in no way represent River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy. Tonight's recipe is stuffed zucchini, Turkish style. It will take about 1 hour to prepare and bake. We'll make 4 servings, 2 halves per serving. The ingredients that you will need are 4 medium zucchini, about 7 inches long, halved lengthwise, 3 tablespoons of butter, 3/4 cup finely minced onion, 3 smallish cloves of crushed garlic, that usually means triple that amount, 3 beaten eggs, 1/2 cup crumbled feta cheese, 3/4 cups grated Swiss cheese, 2 tablespoons freshly chopped parsley, 1 tablespoon fresh chopped dill, or 3/4 teaspoon dried dill weed, 1½ tablespoon of flour, salt and pepper to taste, paprika for the top. To prepare, scoop out the insides of the zucchini to leave a 1/2 inch rim. Chop the innards into little bits and cook in butter with onions, garlic, salt, a few shakes, and pepper until onions are soft. Combine with flour, cheese, herbs, and beaten egg. Correct salt and pepper. Fill the zucchini cavities and dust the tops with paprika. Bake at 375 for 30 minutes or until the filling solidifies. Serve with a fresh tomato salad. And that is how you prepare stuffed zucchini, Turkish style. And that was a recipe from the Moosewood Cookbook by Molly Katzen. Continuing from our last reading of the Foucault Reader, from the chapter, Right of Death and Power over Life. For such a power, execution was at the same time a limit, a scandal, and a contradiction. Hence, capital punishment could not be maintained except by invoking less the enormity of the crime itself than the monstrosity of the criminal. His incorrigibility and the safeguard of society. One had the right to kill those who represented a kind of biological danger to others. One might say that the ancient right to take life or let live was replaced by a power to foster life or disallow it to the point of death. This is perhaps what explains the disqualification of death which marks the recent wane of the rituals and that accompanied it. The death is so carefully evaded is linked less to a new anxiety which makes death unbearable for our societies than to the fact that the procedures of power have not ceased to turn away from death. In the passage from this world to the other, death was the manner in which a terrestrial sovereignty was relieved by another, singularly more powerful sovereignty. The pageantry that surrounded it was in the category of political ceremony. Now it is over life. Throughout its unfolding, that power establishes its domination. Death is power's limit. The moment that escapes it, death becomes the most secret aspect of existence, the most private. It is not surprising that suicide, once a crime, since it was a way to usurp the power of death, which the sovereign alone, whether the one here below or the Lord above, had the right to exercise, became, in the course of the 19th century, one of the first conducts to enter into the sphere of sociological analysis. It testified to the individual and private right to die, at the borders and in the interstices of power that was exercised over life. The determination to die, strange and yet so persistent and constant in its manifestations, and consequently so difficult to explain as being due to particular circumstances or individual accidents, was one of the first astonishments of a society in which political power had assigned itself the task of administering life. In concrete terms, starting in the 17th century, this power over life evolved in two basic forms. These forms were not antithetical, however, they constituted rather two poles of development linked together by a whole intermediary cluster of relations. One of these poles, the first to be formed, it seems, centered on the body as a machine, its disciplining, the optimization of its capabilities, the extortion of its forces, the parallel increase of its usefulness and its docility, its integration into systems of efficient and economic controls. All this was ensured by the procedures of power that characterized the disciplines in anatopolitics of the human body. The second, formed somewhat later, focused on the species body, the body imbued with the mechanics of life and serving as a basis of the biological processes, propagation, births, and mortality, the level of health, life expectancy, and longevity, with all the conditions that can cause these to vary. Their supervision was effected through an entire series of interventions and regulatory controls, a biopolitics of the population. The disciplines of the body and the regulations of the population constituted the two poles around which the organization of power over life was deployed. The setting up, in the course of the classical age, of this great bipolar technology, anatomic and biological, individualizing and specifying, directed toward the performances of the body, with attention to the processes of life, characterized a power whose highest function was perhaps no longer to kill, but to invest life through and through. The old power of death that symbolized sovereign power was now carefully supplanted by the administration of bodies and the calculated management of life. During the classical period, there was a rapid development of various disciplines: universities, secondary schools, barracks, workshops. There was also the emergence in the field of political practices and economic observation of the problems of birth rate, longevity, public health, housing, and migration. Hence, there was an explosion of numerous and diverse techniques for achieving the subjugation of bodies and the control of populations, marking the beginning of an era of biopower. The two directions taken by its development still appeared to be clearly separate in the 18th century. With regard to discipline, this development was embodied in institutions such as the army and the schools. And in reflection on tactics, apprenticeship, education, the nature of societies, ranging from the strictly military analysis of Marshal de Saxe to the political reveries of Gilbert or Servan. As for population controls, one notes the emergence of demography, the evaluation of the relationship between resources and inhabitants, the construction of tables analyzing wealth and its circulation, the work of Quesnay, Mohieu, and Sussmilch, the philosophy of the ideologists as a theory of ideas, signs the individual genesis of sensations, but also a theory of the social composition of interests. Ideology being a doctrine of apprenticeship, but also a doctrine of contracts, and the regulated formation of the social body, no doubt constituted the abstract discourse in which one sought to coordinate these two techniques of power in order to construct a general theory of it. In point of fact, however, they were not to be joined at the level of speculative discourse, but in the form of concrete arrangements, adjacent concretes. That would go to make up the great technology of power in the 19th century. The development of sexuality would be one of them, and one of the most important. The biopower was, without question, an indispensable element in the development of capitalism. The latter would not have been possible without the controlled insertion of bodies into the machinery of production and the adjustment of the phenomena of population to economic processes. But this was not all it required. It also needed the growth of both these factors, their reinforcement as well as their availability and docility. It had to have methods of power capable of optimizing forces, aptitudes, and life in general, without at the same time making them more difficult to govern. If the development of the great instruments of the state as institutions of power ensured the maintenance of production relations, the rudiments of anatomo and biopolitics, created in the 18th century as techniques of power, present at every level of the social body and utilized by very diverse institutions, The family and the army, schools and the police, individual medicine and the administration of collective bodies operated in the sphere of economic processes. Their development and the forces working to sustain them. They also acted as factors of segregation and social hierarchization, exerting their influence on the respective forces of both these movements, guaranteeing relations of domination and effects of hegemony. The adjustment of the accumulation of men to that of capital, the joining of the growth of human groups to the expansion of the production forces and the differential allocation of profit was made possible in part by the exercise of biopower in its many forms and modes of application. The investment of the body, its valorization, and the distributive management of its forces were at the time indispensable. One knows how many times the question has been raised concerning the role of an ascetic morality in the first formation of capitalism. But what occurred in the 18th century in some Western countries, even bound up with development of capitalism, was a different phenomenon. Having perhaps a wider impact than the new morality, this was nothing less than the entry of life into history. That is, the entry of phenomena peculiar to the life of the human species into the order of knowledge and power, into the sphere of political techniques. It is not a question of claiming that this was the moment when the first contact between life and history was brought about. On the contrary, the pressure exerted by the biological on the historical had remained very strong for thousands of years. Epidemics and famine were the two great dramatic forms of this relationship that was always dominated by the menace of death. But through a circular process, the economic and primarily agricultural development of the 18th century, and an increase in productivity and resources even more rapid than the demographic growth it encouraged, allowed a measure of relief from these profound threats. Despite some renewed outbreaks, the period of great ravages from starvation and plague had come to a close before the French Revolution. Death was ceasing to torment life so directly. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have this evening. Thank you for tuning in. That was a reading of the chapter Right of Death and Power Over Life from the Foucault Reader, edited by Paul Rabineau, an introduction to Foucault's thought with major new unpublished material. Tune in next week for a continuation of this and other readings. You have been listening to Tea Time with Cassius. I have been your host, Cassius King. Have a good evening.